Well, welcome everybody. My name is Rick Lawson and I'm a ranger here at Minuteman National Historical Park. So yes, that makes me Ranger Rick. So we're going to talk about militiamen. We're going to talk about the militia. The name of this talk is Muster the Militia. And it's very important that we do this talk here in front of Hartwell Tavern. Ephraim Hartwell would have served in his militia when he was a younger man. He had 5 sons. All 5 of his sons were in the militia. So I keep using this term militia. Let's play the word association game. When you hear the term militia, what do you think of? What comes to mind? What does the word mean?
Civilian.
Civilian. Okay, so we have civilian. What else?
Military.
So we have a military made up of civilian, the civilian military. Okay, what else? We're building on this to try and get a definition.
Voluntary.
Voluntary. So we have a voluntary military. Wow, that's a tongue twister. Made up of civilians. What else? Are these men trained?
No.
I see a lot of shaking heads. No, I don't think so.
They shoot to live. So.
Okay. Okay, they train in units. Okay. So maybe some training, huh?
They don't have anyone that supplies them with their equipment.
Okay. Okay.
They've got their own stuff.
Okay. So, are they paid or unpaid?
Unpaid.
So we have a military force made up of civilians who don't get much training, have problems getting supplies, and they're not paid. Doesn't sound like a group I'd want to belong to. By the laws of Massachusetts and many of the other colonies, every man between the age of 16 and 60 is required by law to serve in his town militia. It's easier to get out of jury duty today than it was to get out of militia duty back in the 18th century. Not that I'm suggesting that anybody should try to get out of jury duty. Just say your brother's cup. But if anybody wanted to get out of militia duty back then, you paid a heavy fine. So if you are able-bodied and a man, you're in your militia. Now, of course, there were some exemptions. If you were a teacher, preacher, doctor, if you were a student at Harvard College, training to become a teacher or preacher, if you were the captain or crew of a large vessel and the community is along the ocean, and that vessel over a certain size is not going to be in port most times, then the men are exempt from the town militia duty. But if the ship happens to be in port and there was an attack, then they would be expected to protect not only their own ship, but to protect the town. Now, it's not a big drain on your time because, like you said, they're farmers. And so maybe 5 times a year, you're going to drill and practice. But you are going to train. And you're going to do that training for your entire life, from age 16 to 60. I'm 58 years old. That means for 42 years, I would have been in my militia, drilling and training since age 16. During that time, assuming that we're looking at 1775 and you clock back 42 years, there were 3 major conflicts in North America. I could have fought in all 3 of them. Because just about every 10 years there's a war. Now, it's not as much training as the regular army is. Now, somebody had said, well, their guns, they were used to putting food on the table with the guns, or something to that effect, right? You said that, or somebody had said that. That's really not the case. By 1770, there's no wild game except birds and small little animals. So do you want him gone for 3 days to come back with 2 chipmunks and a squirrel? Or do you want him to spend 20 minutes slaughtering a pig out back and then getting back to the work because there's a lot of work to be done? It's all domesticated protein by the early 1700s. They're not hunting to feed their families. The only reason that a man has this gun is for war. Now, men might have other guns, and that would be perfectly fine, because all the law said is you must provide your own weapon, a firelock, with a barrel over 3.5 feet in length. So, if you have a bird hunting gun called a fowler, maybe with a barrel about that long, that meets the thing. And instead of shooting bird shot, little teeny little sand-like pebbles, you're going to shoot maybe a 49 caliber ball. This is a 75 caliber military issued weapon. It shoots a 69 caliber ball, and it is made for the military. Now, in North America, you could get a gun in just about any store in town. You just go in, and they would right there next to the nice linen and silk and wool, all folded over, ready to be made into clothing. Might be a couple of muskets, maybe a bayonet or a sword, even a cannon. You could buy that stuff in a store. Now, it's expensive, though. It's an investment. The cost of a good weapon is equal in about the cost of a good used car today. So, when your son's turning 16, he's not getting his driver's license, he's getting a musket. You're not giving him the used car, you're giving him a musket. And it had been that way since before the white men came to North America. The concept of militia is older than the British government's army. It's been around longer. Think about England. England's a large island. And at any time, everybody's tried to invade England. The Vikings, the Romans, the French, the Spanish and the French, sometimes together, Germans, everybody's tried to invade England. And it would take them a while to raise up an army if there was actually going to be a long, drawn-out war. So each individual town needed to protect itself. When the Puritans come over here, they bring that form of self-protection with them. Who do the Pilgrims need protecting from? Who's already here? Indians, the natives, the Aboriginal people of North America. Been here for thousands of years. And at first, they're getting along fine with their European neighbors, because these are not the first Europeans that the natives had seen. There have been many men coming over. Remember, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, right? Remember that poem? Well, Pilgrims are 1616. Everybody thinks Christopher Columbus, Pilgrims, 1776. And they're like a week apart, because that's probably how you learned it in school. But there's hundreds of years in between those three events. And during that time, before the Pilgrims came over, men are coming over here. Men from France, men from Spain, men from England, and the Dutch. And they're not setting up long-time communities. They'd maybe set up a camp on the beach, trade with the natives, do a little hunting, cut down some trees, whatever, and then leave. And the Indians were okay with that. The Pilgrims were the first ones to stay. And then a second boat came, and a third, and more. And they start pushing the natives off of their land. Eventually the natives start pushing back. Like I said, just about every 10 years there's a war. The only war that the British government sent any professional troops was the last one before the Revolutionary War. The one that your textbooks called the French and Indian War, which I've never liked as a name for a war. First off, when you put the in front of it, it makes it seem like there was only one. There's actually 4 major conflicts involving France versus England in North America. And who names a war after the people who lost? I don't know, it just doesn't make any sense to me. In Europe, it's known as the 7 Years' War, and it is a global conflict. But that's the first time that any professional soldiers were sent to North America. So how did they fight these other wars? With militia. It's a time-honored tradition. And so you train in your town. So like you said, it's a local unit. It's a local town-based group. But you are part of a bigger regiment. So here in Lincoln, back then it was Concord, in the earlier wars, didn't become the town of Lincoln until the 1750s. So in the town of what was Concord, a man might have came into town and said, okay, we need 25 men, and we're going to go up to New France, Canada now, and we're going to take the fort outside Quebec. So we'll be gone 3 months. This is how much you get paid. And you do get paid, because you're not fighting to save your community. You're joining a larger expeditionary force that's going to go up into Canada. And many men did that because you might be able to bring a war prize home, And you've got a son who's going to be turning 16 soon, and so you'll leave him and the rest of the kids and the wife home, and then you'll go up there, maybe come back with a couple, 3 muskets. Wrap one all up in cloth, oil it down, and save it till he turns 16. And then that way you've got muskets for everybody. And then those same muskets, old French guns, are being used in April 19th, 1775, against the British. During the last war, the French and Indian War, the militias fighting side by side with the British. Within 12 years, they're no longer side by side, but pointing at each other. So I am dressed as according to law. I have my firelock, like I said, with the barrel over 3.5 feet in length. The barrel is smooth bore, not rifled. It's like a big shotgun. Just as smooth on the inside of the barrel as it is on the outside of the barrel. A rifle did exist. There were plenty of them, especially in what would become Tennessee and other places like that, in Virginia and such, and western Pennsylvania, where there is still big game. But a rifle takes a lot longer to load than a smooth bore. Okay? So I don't care what you see in Hollywood. I'll give you a quick example of how quick you can load this weapon. Take a cartridge, which is a piece of paper rolled into a tube. You tear open the top, you put just a little priming charge in there. You shut this. Put the rest of the gunpowder in, put the ball in, put the paper in to act as wadding. Loaded. 20 seconds you can load it. Rifle takes 1.5 minutes because the projectile of a rifle is much closer to the inside diameter of the barrel of the weapon, and you're almost screwing it into place, especially if it's been fired and fouling is building up, because you want that ball coming out spinning. This is throwing a knuckleball. Just pushes the ball out. No spin. A lot of wobble too. Which is why it's not very accurate.
What's the issue with the length? Just accuracy?
No, the issue with the length is so that you can shoot over the shoulders of the men in front of you. So I already talked a little bit about the weapon, the barrel. The wood part is the stock. The moving parts here is the lock. If I have it all together, what do I have? Lock, stock, and barrel. That's where that saying comes from. There's lots of sayings that go along with this. The weapon right now is in a safety position. This is in the half-cock position. This weapon will not go off half-cocked. He was very, very straight and tall. He was straight as a ramrod. Can't have a curved ramrod. Won't work. There's lots of sayings that go along with this weapon. Now I have a bladed sidearm, a bayonet, a long knife that fits over the end of the barrel. Many men in the militia don't have bayonets, but you're still required to have a bladed sidearm, so maybe you'd have a short sword, a long knife, or a hatchet. I also have a canteen, a water bottle, and I have a backpack, knapsack, that would maybe have a change of clothes and a couple days provisions. And I'd be required to have that and turn out with this for my militia day, for drilling and practicing. So, like I said, you guys are standing in rows called ranks. Every 2 people this way is a file, rank and file. That's where we get that term from. So, this is great, being in a line, but not a great way to move down the road. Most militia companies are bigger than this group here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. So much, maybe double this size, so let's say 36. So it would be double this width. So we couldn't walk down the road like this, right? So, so you get the idea. Working together, we could overcome a superior force, or at least keep them from advancing us. Now, what are minutemen? A lot of people go, well, what are minutemen? Was everybody a minuteman? Well, no. Every man is a militiaman, but not necessarily is every militiaman a minuteman. In 1774, there was a series of events that led for the Provincial Congress of Massachusetts to realize we need to get some better people, better trained, maybe get them some better equipment, and have them train more often. So instead of training maybe once a month, 5 months out of the year, let's have them train 2 to 3 times a week. Because that's going to take them away possibly from their businesses, we're going to ask for volunteers, and we're actually going to pay them. Now, it wasn't like somebody was standing there with a stack of, Benjamins, making it rain, handing out money. Your name would go in a ledger book. And then you'd have to go back to the town and go, well, I turned out for these drills, and I also turned out on April 19th, and I needed to get paid. And maybe you got a deal on your taxes from the town. But not every town had Minutemen. Lexington voted not to have Minutemen. Here in Lincoln, they had only established their Minutemen in late January of 1775. So they'd only had maybe a month or two of training as Minutemen. But they did have a minute unit here. There were 2 minute companies in Concord. They had started theirs in October of 74. So we're going to give you guys a demonstration now of firing of the musket. On April 19th, 1775, before the 400 militiamen came off the hill, they were told by their officers to swap out the flints. We know this because in the 1940s, long before we were a park, there was an archaeologist who came to the town of Concord, and he was checking out where the militiamen had stood, but he was also looking for Indian artifacts. And he actually found in 2 rows 300 musket flints. So that means before they went down to the North Bridge, one of the officers said, swap out your flints and put in a fresh one. Because they may only get 1 shot. They want to make sure it's going to actually work. So because I dumped my prime, I have to re-prime. We always carry a couple of extra rounds with us just in case. Let's try it again. Ready to clear this spot.
All right, third time's the charm. Make ready? Present. Fire!
There we go.
Now, you may not be able to hear a drill sergeant giving off commands like that. Instead, you'd be listening for a fife or drum beat that would be communicating these commands to you. So you would be listening and waiting. You would be, after a certain command, you would have to do everything as quickly as possible. Prime and load! So now Rick's going to go through all those steps by himself. A well-trained member of the militia or Minutemen could be ready to fire again within 15 to 20 seconds. Make ready. Present. Fire.
There we go. That's better. April 19th, 1775 was a very unique day in history. Not only is it the beginning of the American Revolutionary War, but it was the only time that the Minuteman concept was used in the American Revolutionary War in battle. After that, those men are no longer Minutemen. They're back to a militia-based army of the colony of Massachusetts that is surrounding Boston for 11 months. Less than 2 months later, those same men who had fought on April 19th and many more are fighting at the Battle of Bunker Hill. 2 weeks after Bunker Hill, General Washington shows up and signs up the majority of those men for his brand new Continental Army. April 19th was a day that ordinary men did extraordinary things, men on both sides of the battlefield. Please remember, as you're visiting Minuteman National Historical Park today, it's not only a great place to visit on what's turned out to be a very beautiful day, but it is also a battlefield, and in many places it is a graveyard. There are British troops buried all throughout the park. Thank you.
Thank you.